Hello and welcome to another episode of the Expanse Abridged Podcast series. Today I got chapter 54, which is a Miller chapter of the first book in the series, Leviathan Wakes. I'm recording these in advance, but I hope everyone had a lovely Christmas. And it's a very sad time, it's our final Miller chapter at the moment. So our boy Miller had previously spoken to Holden in the chapters before, and kind of got enough time with them delaying the Earth nuclear missiles to go and try and find his Julie Mao, inside Eros. I'm kind of joining there as he's hunting her kind of desperately because he doesn't have much time, only like a day and a half until the entire thing's blown up. So he's going, "Come on," Miller said, "come on, you son of a bitch," because he starts saying that now. And at the moment he's like wandering around the hospital and he's trying to find some more oxygen because obviously he's been in the station now for many, many hours in an old belter spacesuit and he's running out. So he finds his tank. He picked up the green, it was a green oxygen tank. He took a deep sighing breath of dying air, another few hours. He tops up his suit and he gets 4 more hours. He'd won himself 4 more hours. And that's the third time since he'd rang Holden he's had to kind of top himself up. I think he's been going at this point for like 30 odd hours, just going around. And he wasn't looking for air, he was looking for Juliet. He let himself stretch. The kink in his neck and back were threatening to turn to cramps. The CO2 levels in his suit were still on the high side of acceptable. Behind him, the bomb in its cart kept its own counsel. Somewhere in the maze of corridors and rooms, the dead city, Juliet Mao was driving them back to Earth. And then it goes on, he's been bouncing around, he's been going for hotspots, because we had that for the previous chapter. Miller would try and find areas that are slightly warmer, being like a hub of activity of the protomolecule, and every time he's failed. And as he's going around, he's not even imagining Julie anymore. So for like the last 30, 40 chapters, he's imagined a version of Julie talking to him, hanging out. And even she's gone now. So he's all alone. He's a very, very sad little man. And he goes, he had to find her soon. He could feel exhaustion grinding at him, little teeth chewing in the back of his mind. He already wasn't thinking as clearly as he should. Full circle. He'd come full circle. Once in a different life, he'd taken the task of finding her. Then, when he'd failed, they'd been taking vengeance. Now he had the chance to find her again, to save her, and if he couldn't, he was still pulling a cheap, squeaky-wheeled wagon behind him that would do for revenge. So it's the whole thing where Miller's going to come back and forth, trying to find her, failing, and then, it's cool. It's nice seeing, him talking through it at the end, or his end anyway, and our final chapter with him. So he goes on, and the hospital, he tried to find there, didn't find anything. He went to some bio labs, so like other research areas, there was nothing there, and he was so close, but he couldn't quite reach her. And it's kind of affected him. It's affecting him so much, he starts imagining Holden. So he appears before him, he says, "You can't stop here," Holden said. You have to stop running and get on the right road." Miller looked over his shoulder. The captain stood real or not, whereas inner Julie would have been. "Well, that's interesting," Miller thought. "You can stop her or I will," the imaginary Holden said. And he's imagining Holden. So Miller just acknowledges he's imagining Holden, so it's his mind kind of being weird. But he's put blood all around the side of the man's mouth. And then it wasn't Holden anymore, it was Havelock, the other Earther, his old partner, and then it was Muss, her eyes as dead as his own. Miller had, it kind of goes on a bit, and basically he's just kind of trying to figure it out through imagining all his old partners, all his old things, and he realises the last time he saw Julie was at the kind of crack den when they found her dying in the shower, and the protogen scientists would have taken the body, smeared it around, spread the sample about, and then stored her for a bit because they had to kind of pretend it would have been safe. And have to store it for a little bit before they did the full experiment. So he's like, where would they do that? They would need somewhere contained, but there couldn't be a main hospital because people may not know what's going on. And that's the idea. He's like, okay, that's my logic going forward. And he's still imagining his friends. And he imagines Muss, and she was the kind of dead-eyed person he was working with that told him he was shit and everyone knew he was shit. Says it's a drug house, Mudd said in his mind. You want privacy, you want control. Extracting the bug from the dead girl and extracting the good shit from the poppy seeds might have different chemistry, but it's still crime. So he's going through and realising they need somewhere private to do their kind of evil chemical stuff. And where would you put it? Because they have to put it near the casino floor, but not in the casino floor. With the casino floor being where they gas people and spread the stuff out, and that's where Holden and Miller escaped from when they were held hostage by a load of security guards. And he kind of works his way there, eventually goes, the backup environmental controls, emergency facility, no foot traffic, and it's got all the equipment for isolation you need, because obviously the Protogen guys need Julie isolated so they themselves don't become infected. And Muss said, she smiled joyously. "See, I knew you could think that through." For less than a second, Muss was gone, and then Julie Mao, his Julie, was in her place. "Hang tight, I'll be right there." It's kind of cute. It's fun seeing how he kind of imagines it all in his head, that kind of inner conversation that he could do, but then he's thinking so unclearly, and almost in his madness, he goes mad, loses it, then comes back around, and that's what actually gets him all the way to the end. So when he said it was less than 33 hours from the moment he'd realised that Julie Mao wasn't dead to the one where he cycled down the emergency seals and pulled his car into Eros's backup environmental control facility. So he's been going for 33 hours just trying to run around and find it, so he must be dying at this point. He steps in and he sinks up into his ankles and in the floor. It's like a thick carpet of the protomolecule and has to leave the bomb outside. He kind of walks through into this grotto, blue light swirling everywhere, sometimes sticking to his helmet, sometimes kind of floating around, and he finds Julie. He says she was in a hazmat analysis node, lying on a bed of the dark thread that spilled out from her spine until it was indistinguishable from a massive fairy tale cushion of her own flowing hair. Tiny points of blue light glittered on her face, her arms, her breasts. The bone spurs that had been pressing out of her skin had grown into sweeping, almost architectural connections with the lushness around her. Her legs were gone, lost in the tangle of dark alien webs. She reminded Miller of a mermaid who had traded her fins for a space station. Miller stood beside her. She didn't have quite the same face as his imagined Julie. The real woman was wider through the jaw, and her nose wasn't as straight as he remembered it. He didn't notice that he was weeping until he tried to wipe the tears away, batting his helmet with a gloved hand. He had to make do with blinking. So he's finally found it, and I really like that description that the author takes the time to go, this isn't the same Julie he's been imagining. Because I think that's quite important, that was Miller invested with the protomolecule? Had he just imagined a young attractive girl? And it goes, his imagined Julie is like a separate creature almost to the real Julie. Like it's a thing he's kind of fell for the person that's not even real. And I think he's been honest with himself as well, so it's quite cool when they finally see it, there are these differences. And he slowly wakes her up. Instead of he was thinking I could zap her with adrenaline from my suit, but he doesn't. He holds her like his old ex-wife Candice. Slowly wakes up, but her eyes opened. They weren't human anymore. The sclera etched with swirls of red and black. The iris the same luminous blue as the fireflies. Not human, but still Julie. Oh, she's a bit confused. Doesn't really know where she is. She's like, "Where am I? Who are you?" And he's like, "Yeah, we haven't officially met," and he has to kind of introduce himself. And even she realises his whole engagement to know her was a kidnap job from her parents. And Miller goes, "I kind of cocked it up, though." Julie goes, "Something happened to me." "Yeah, it did. I'm scared." No, don't be scared. It's all right. "I dreamed I was racing. I was going home." The Miller kind of takes her hand. She's crying blue tears as well, blue from the protomolecule. And Miller asks her to hold the hand terminal, so she's holding down the switch for him. And he removes his helmet. His suit alarms shrieked at him when he undid his helmet seals. He turned them off. The air was strange, acetate and cumin and deep, powerful musk that made him think of hibernating animals. Julie watched him as he stripped off his gloves. Right then, the protomolecule was latching onto him, burrowing into his skin and eyes, getting ready to do to him what it had done to everyone on Eros. He didn't care. He took the hand terminal back and then laced his fingers through hers. So it's quite cute that. But Miller just, I don't know, he's finally reached all of his end and he kills himself rather than through the bomb, through the protomolecule, so he can actually hold Julie's hand in the flesh. And he goes, she's like, "I want to go back to Earth. I can feel something in me. It's almost hungry." And he's like, "You can't go back to Earth. What had Holden said? Give her Venus. Head for Venus instead." "That's not what it wants," she said. "It's what we've got on offer," Miller replied. And then he kind of explains it, and then Julie goes, "It'll eat them too, the same way it ate me." What happens on Venus? Miller goes, "We die, maybe. I don't know. But we don't take a lot of people with us. And if we don't die, then that'll be interesting." Then he kind of hypes her up, says, "You're really hard. You can do it, big boy." And as she kind of thinks about going to Venus instead of Earth, because she's been dreaming about flying the Razorback home, the fireflies swirled around them, the blue lights pulsing slightly, bright and dim, bright and dim. Miller saw it in her face when she made the decision. All around them, the lights went bright, the grotto flooding in soft blue, and then dimmed back to where they were before. So that kind of course correction changes the protomolecule. It reacts to kind of what Julie's thinking. Because I guess that's the first human it's properly bonded to. And as we discussed kind of last chapter, the chapter before, the way the protomolecule is kind of understood is more, it wanted to steal bacteria, it's latched onto people, it's improvising. And I think that's like a reasonable way of interpreting why people would make it act in a different way. So anyway, Miller's on his way. Okay, so I wondered if he'd have time to deactivate the bomb. And then he looked at Julie. Julie at Andromeda Mao, OPA pilot, heir to the Mao Krakowski corporate throne, the seed crystal of a future beyond anything he'd ever dreamed. He'd have plenty of time. "I'm afraid," she said. "Don't be," he said. "I don't know what's going to happen. No one ever does. And look, you don't have to do this alone. I can feel something in the back of my mind. It wants something. I don't understand. It's so big." Reflexively, he kissed at the back of her hand. There was an ache starting deep in his belly, a sense of illness, a moment's nausea, the first pangs of his transformation into Eros. "Don't worry," he said. "We're going to be fine." And the chapter ends. Very sad. Last boy of Miller. In this form anyway. But it's cute that I really like the description of Julie being attached to this kind of primal hunger, something so large from this godlike universe from billions of years ago, but also it having a very base urge of kind of get biomass, get resources, and then turn them into something. Like the proto molecules, a set of instructions that we know. It's cool how Juliet can kind of control that, but also be terrified by how powerful and big it all is. Like the darkness and the great beyond is quite cool. So anyway, I think that's pretty much the chapter. That's all I want to say on that. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and I hope you have a lovely week.